I used to work as a muezzin in a small mosque that stood right beside a lonely highway. The mosque itself was old, built with tin sheets and simple brick walls, nothing grand or decorated. What made it even more unsettling was its location. All around it, there were no houses, no neighborhoods, no families living nearby, just empty land, barren fields, and the long stretch of highway cutting through the silence. The imam of the mosque was very old, his health too weak to wake up for the Fajr prayer. So most of the time, it was my responsibility to lead the prayer. Every day, I would wake up half an hour before Fajr, wash, get ready, and climb the steps of the mosque to call the adhan. But there was one problem. Because the mosque stood in such an isolated place, very few people came for Fajr. Most of those who joined were not local residents, they were travelers, people who happened to be passing through the highway at that hour. It often felt like I was calling the adhan into an empty void, my voice echoing through the misty road with no one there to listen. And then, something strange began to happen. I noticed that almost every day, before Fajr, there was a man standing across the highway, always in the same spot. He never crossed the road, never came closer, never spoke a word. He just stood there, still, watching. At first, I ignored him. I thought perhaps he was a traveler, maybe someone waiting for transport, or a villager on his way somewhere. But the strange thing was he was never there after the adhan. Once I gave the call to prayer, he would vanish. It became a routine. Before the adhan he was there, after the adhan he was gone. I told myself it was nothing, just coincidence. Maybe I was imagining things because of the silence, the emptiness of that place. But deep inside, I felt something was wrong. Something about the way he stood there, every day, without moving, without a word. It made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it, but I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of something far more terrifying. Days turned into weeks, yet the same pattern continued. Every morning, when I woke up before Fajr, I would see him, always in the same place across the highway, standing in the mist, his body still like a shadow carved out of the night. At first, I tried to convince myself he was harmless, maybe just a stranger, someone waiting for a bus or a ride along the highway. But the more I observed him, the more uneasy I became. He never moved. He never spoke. He never even looked away. No matter what, his face seemed fixed in my direction, as if his hollow gaze was locked on me alone. And as soon as I called the adhan, he was gone, disappearing as though he had never been there. I even tried to catch him in the act. One morning, I deliberately rushed outside earlier than usual, hoping to see him arrive, to understand where he came from. But he was already there, standing silently as if he had been waiting for me all night. Another morning, I delayed the adhan, dragging the moments longer, pretending to check the microphone wires. But when the adhan finally left my lips, I looked back, and he was gone again. It was impossible. The silence around the mosque only made it worse. No houses nearby meant no voices, no sounds of life. The only noises at that hour were the distant hum of a truck speeding down the highway, the rustle of the wind across the barren fields, and the occasional cry of a night bird. In that emptiness, the figure's presence felt unnatural, like a wound in reality. I never saw him during the day, never in the afternoon, never at Maghrib, never at Isha, only before Fajr, only in that dead hour before dawn, when the world was caught between darkness and light. Sometimes, when I stood on the mosque steps adjusting the loudspeaker, I could feel his stare drilling into me, even through the fog. A coldness would crawl up my spine, the hairs on my neck standing upright. And I would rush through the adhan just to make him disappear. And yet, no matter how many times he vanished with the adhan, the fear he left behind lingered, a gnawing dread, whispering that one day he would not disappear. One day, he would come closer. One night, everything changed. It was darker than usual, the sky covered with thick clouds that blocked even the faintest moonlight. The highway looked abandoned, stretching endlessly into the shadows, and the wind howled like a warning across the empty fields. That night, I woke up earlier than usual, restless. My chest felt heavy, and I had a strange sense that something was going to happen. I tried to shake it off, and went through the usual routine wudu, folding my prayer cap, and preparing to step out. As always, when I pushed open the mosque door, I saw him, the same man, standing across the road, still as a statue. But something about him felt different that night. The mist was thicker, wrapping around him like a shroud, but I could make out more details than before. His clothes were old, ragged, almost like burial garments. His head was tilted slightly, and though the fog blurred his features, I could feel his eyes staring right into me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. For weeks, he had done nothing but watch, and vanish. But that night, he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he took his first step toward the road. I froze, my body refusing to obey me. My mind screamed to rush up the steps and call the adhan, to banish him like every other time, but I couldn't move. My legs felt nailed to the ground, my breath caught in my chest. The sound of his footsteps was unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't the sound of a man walking, it was heavier, dragging, like something dead being pulled across the earth. Each step echoed unnaturally against the silence of the night. He crossed half the road. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. His face was becoming clearer now, pale, hollow. His mouth hung open slightly, as if frozen in a silent scream. His eyes, empty sockets, black and endless, stared directly at me. I stumbled back, finally breaking free from my paralysis, and rushed up the steps. My voice cracked as I began the adhan, each word trembling, but louder than ever before. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The moment the words filled the air, I dared to glance toward him, and he was gone. The road lay empty again, silent, as if he had never existed. But this time was different. He hadn't simply vanished into thin air. I was certain, absolutely certain, that he had almost reached the mosque door before the adhan pushed him away. I stood there long after finishing the call, body shaking, my eyes fixed on the empty highway. The silence pressed down on me, suffocating. That was the night I realized he wasn't just watching anymore. He wanted to enter. The next night, my fear was heavier than sleep. Still, I forced myself awake before Fajr, whispering prayers under my breath, hoping it would be an ordinary morning. But somewhere in my heart, I knew something was waiting. I washed, dressed, and stepped toward the mosque door with trembling hands. The air outside was unusually cold, sharp, like a knife against my skin. The street was silent, too silent. And then I froze. He was no longer across the highway. He was standing right outside the mosque door. The same figure I had seen for weeks, now so close that I could see the folds of his white, tattered garment. His face was still half hidden in shadow, but his voice, low, broken, unnatural, slithered into my ears. You must lead a janaza. Now, my blood ran cold. A janaza? At this hour? Who has died? I asked, my voice shaking. If someone passes away, it is announced. People gather. It cannot be like this. The man didn't answer my questions. Instead, he stepped aside slightly, and there it was, lying on the ground in front of the mosque. A body wrapped in white kafan. My breath stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled back, whispering Subhanallah under my breath. But the figure moved closer, his hollow eyes never leaving mine. They are waiting, he said, his voice now like 100 whispers layered together. The body is here. The people are here. Only you can pray. I cannot, I shouted, finally gathering courage. Fajr is near. We'll pray Janaza after the adhan, not before. His expression darkened, and the silence of the night seemed to shatter with his anger. No, now, before dawn, or you will not leave this place alive. He stepped forward, reaching for me with a strength that felt inhuman. I struggled, pulled away, but his grip was icy and powerful, draining every ounce of energy from my body. In desperation, closed my eyes, reciting verses as loudly as I could. And when I opened them, I was no longer in front of the mosque. I stood in the middle of a vast, endless graveyard. Rows upon rows of graves stretched as far as I could see, fading into darkness. The air was thick with the stench of soil and decay. My knees weakened as 1,000 unseen voices began to chant low, mournful whispers that echoed all around me. I stumbled forward, tripping over broken headstones, trying to escape. But the graves never ended. My legs sank into the earth, pulling me down. My heart pounded in panic. Then, from the fog, I saw him again. The same man. He was standing beside a freshly dug grave, and beside him lay the shrouded body. "Pray," he demanded. "Pray, or you will stay here forever." I shook my head violently, gasping. "Not before Adhan. I will not." The man tilted his head, slowly. Then, with a chilling calmness, he bent down and unwrapped the kafan covering the corpse's face. My soul nearly tore apart from my body. It was my father. His lifeless face, pale and still, lay before me. His eyes closed, his features unmistakable. My chest collapsed under a wave of grief, terror, and disbelief. "No, no, this is not real. My father is alive," I screamed, tears flooding my eyes. But the sight was too clear, too real to deny. The graveyard began to spin. My body collapsed to the ground, my mind overwhelmed with agony. And then I woke up. I was lying in front of the mosque, drenched in sweat, trembling uncontrollably. The wrapped body was still there. The man was sitting calmly beside it, waiting. My lips trembled as I whispered, "I will not. I cannot. Until the Adhan." The man's hollow eyes bore into mine. Then, in a final hiss, he said, "If you will not pray now, then at least look once more." He uncovered the face of the body again, and I saw my father's corpse, exactly as before. The scream that tore from my throat echoed into the empty night as everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, dawn had broken. The call of the rooster echoed faintly from a distant village, and the golden hue of early morning crept across the highway. I was lying just outside the mosque door, my head resting against the cold stone step. My body felt drained, like I had been fighting all night. My throat was raw, as if I had been screaming for hours. I sat up slowly, my heart still racing, my mind trying to make sense of what had happened. The street was empty. No man, no corpse, nothing. It was as if the entire night had been a dream. But the pain in my chest, the chill in my bones, the tears still staining my face, it was all too real. Confused and terrified, I staggered inside the mosque. The old Hujr was already there, sitting quietly on his prayer mat. His wrinkled eyes looked at me with concern. "You look pale, Beta," he said softly. "Did you not sleep?" I wanted to tell him everything, but my lips refused to move. Something deep inside warned me this was not a story to be told lightly. So I shook my head and mumbled, "Just tired, Hujr." The Adhan for Fajr was called. I gave it with a trembling voice, my hands still shaking as I lifted them to my ears. The Jamaat was small, as usual, just a handful of travelers and passersby. The prayer passed, but my mind was still trapped in the graveyard, staring at my father's lifeless face. I told myself over and over, it was only a dream, a nightmare, nothing more. But then, after sunrise, as the first rays of light spread across the sky, a villager came rushing toward the mosque. His face was pale, his breath uneven, as if he had run a long distance. He looked straight at me and said the words that shattered my soul. "Brother, your father has passed away." The ground beneath me turned to dust. My knees buckled, and I fell where I stood. The voices of the night returned to my ears. The man's command echoed in my head. The sight of my father's shrouded body replayed again and again. It was true. It had not been a dream. Somehow, I had seen it before it happened. Tears blinded my eyes as grief tore through me. I wanted to scream, to deny it, but there was no escape. The vision of last night was not only real, it had been a warning. For days after the burial, could not sleep. I replayed the moment in my head, over and over. The man's cold whisper haunted me. "Pray the Janaza before dawn, or you will not leave." What if I had agreed? What if I had led the Janaza then and there, before the Adhan? Would my father have been saved? Or would I have been trapped forever in that endless graveyard of the dead? I never found the answer. Even now, years later, when the first light of Fajr breaks, I sometimes see a shadow across the highway, watching, silent, waiting, and deep inside, a question gnaws at my soul, a question with no end. That night, if I had prayed the Janaza, what would have happened? Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? subscribe to the Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on the Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to the Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.